such thing as a constitutional crisis does happen, right?
Yeah.
But the judiciary does not want to play this out. I mean, Hamilton writes in Federalist 78 that they're the least dangerous branch because they depend upon the efficacy of the executive branch, even for the enforcement of their own judgments. That's literally true. I mean, people don't think about this. I mean, how do you literally enforce a judgment? Well, you actually get U.S. Marshals to do it. But U.S. Marshals, who do they actually work for?
The president.
Yeah, they're in the DOJ.
Yeah.
Like the U.S. Marshals literally work for Pam Bondi.
All right, guys, we have a rare Friday sit-down for you. Yes, it's true. I'm Dave Rubin. This is the Rubin Report, and joining me is a co-Florida man, the host of the Josh Hammer Show, the senior editor at large at Newsweek, and the author of the new book, Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West. Josh Hammer, welcome back to the Rubin Report.
Dave, you're a dear friend. I appreciate the opportunity once again to converse with you.
Josh, don't butter me up. But first, let's start because I was glancing at the cover here, and every single person from the cover of the book to the back of the book is a Rubin Report refugee. We've got Mark Levin on the front, Senator Ted Cruz, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Beck, Governor Ron DeSantis, Dana Loesch, Yoram Hazony, and Liz Wheeler. So you basically wrote this book using just old clips of my show, I assume.
Dave, it's almost as if you're going to appreciate this book when you start to dive into it. It's almost as if this book was written for you and your audience.
I can probably retire after this. All right. Actually, before we get into Israel and the Jews, I would almost rather talk about anything actually besides that. I feel like we talk about Jews a lot.
Sure.
It's probably not a great time or good things happening to the Jews, but we will talk about that in just a sec. But I want to talk about something else for a second because you're also a lawyer, and there's been a bit of an interesting thing happening as it relates to Trump and these deportations, and now a lower circuit court basically trying to reverse the deportations, trying to literally turn a plane back from El Salvador. I have seen a lot of people I respect on our side of the aisle having different takes on this. Mark Levin got into it with Hugh Hewitt. So good people who I respect. I respect you as a lawyer. What do you make of this? Are we in a constitutional crisis? What do we do? And then we will discuss that.
All right. So we are in a legal crisis, but it's not the legal crisis that the Trump opponents think that we're in. I mean, to listen to them, you would think that Trump is a tyrant. He's a dictator. He's ignoring courts here. He's invoking this dusty 18th century statute, the Alien Enemies Act, to immunize the incoming Hitlerite Fourth Reich or whatever they want. No.
As Tom Homan pointed out, the Constitution's also old, so...
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the Constitution is exactly quite old. So, look, the real question here from a legal perspective is, are these judges acting in line with the judicial power of which the Constitution speaks? Okay, so Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. Article 3 establishes the federal courts there. The very first clause is the vesting clause of Article 3. The judicial power is the phrase that is used to describe the actual, judicial power. So what does it mean? What does it not mean? There has been a misconception in America for a very long time that the judicial power encompasses the ability of any judge, from a lone judge up to and including the Supreme Court, to basically bring an entire program, an entire government, if need be, to halt. That is actually not what the judicial power means.
So that's sort of what the judges are trying to do right now. You've got a lower district court saying, I'm not on board these deportations. I can put a stop to it.
Correct.
Because I'm a separate and equal branch.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they're calling it sometimes a so-called temporary restraining order. Sometimes it's a preliminary injunction. Sometimes it's a nationwide injunction. It's all getting at the same idea, which is that one little puny judge sitting in his chambers in Seattle, Hawaii, here in Florida, Maine, whatever, can just stop an entire government program there. But in actuality, what the judicial power does, literally going back, if we want to Marbury versus Madison, the 1803 case that established judicial review, it applies to the parties to the suit. So the actual judicial power is a judge issues a judgment that binds the litigants to the suit. The notion that you can ever bind
of the case that he's presiding over. Yeah.
Like, dude here, you're plaintiff. Dude here, you're defendant. Yeah. I'm issuing a judgment in my fancy robe and my old wig that they used to wear back in the day. They still wear that, I think, over in London in the UK, the old barrister wigs. So I issue my judgment. You're bound. You're bound. Beyond that, no one is actually strictly bound. By the way, the number one person in American history who most understood this, actually, is my hero in American history, Abraham Lincoln. So after the Dred Scott case of 1857, the worst case in Supreme Court history, held black people are not citizens, they can never be citizens, Lincoln, in his Lincoln-Douglas debates the next year, basically said, I'm not going to follow this as it pertains to anyone other than Dred Scott. And then when he was president, he literally just completely ignored it. He defied Dred Scott. He issued passports to blacks in Western territories in direct defiance of the ruling there because he understood that the judicial power just bound Mr. Dred Scott in that case there. So ultimately, Dave, the way that this has to end, SCOTUS has to take a case where they rule once and for all that the notion that a judge can issue what lawyers would call injunctive relief, like an injunction, a temporary restraining order. They have to rule that doing this on a national level is completely unconstitutional. You can't do that.
Because basically you'd be completely unable to govern if that was the case. Because in essence, any sitting judge could do anything as it relates to anything, to kind of dumb it down for you.
So it would basically turn Republican self-governance into black robe tyranny. I mean, it would turn it into juristocracy, into rule by judges here. And look, it depends how far you and I want to go down the rabbit hole here. Part of this goes back to a somewhat obscure 1958 case called Cooper versus Aaron, which was the very first time that the Supreme Court said that we are the law of the land, even a bare 5-4 majority. That's not how it works. All three branches have the legitimate duty, not just the right, but the actual duty obligation to faithfully interpret the Constitution and apply it as pertains to their own legitimate powers. This is actually the beauty of the separation of powers. When Madison said in Federalist 51, ambition must counteract ambition, this is actually what he was talking about.
So do you have any fear that if this works its way up to the Supreme Court that they would go the wrong way on it, so to speak?
Dave, I am always terrified of Chief Justice John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett. I mean, I probably could have stopped at always terrified in general, but I mean, I'm totally always terrified of this Supreme Court. I mean, ever since I was a law student, I've always been a consistent pessimist about all things judicial branch related, to be honest with you. But honestly, on a bread and butter separation of powers case like this, I'm less pessimistic than most. I think that they actually would rule the right way.
Right. Unless they just suddenly feel that they're like drunk with power and it's like, boy, we could in essence legislate from the bench, which then we're in a genuine constitutional crisis, right?
Yes. Look, such thing as a constitutional crisis does happen, right? Yeah. But the judiciary does not want to play this out. I mean, Hamilton writes in Federalist 78 that they're the least dangerous branch because they depend upon the efficacy of the executive branch even for the enforcement of their own judgments. That's literally true. I mean, people don't think about this. I mean, how do you literally enforce a judgment? Well, you actually get U.S. Marshals to do it. But U.S. Marshals, who do they actually work for?
The president.
Yeah, they're the DOJ. Yeah. Like the U.S. Marshals literally work for Pam Bondi, right? So like a month ago, whatever, this judge in Rhode Island, Judge McConnell, he's threatening to hold Trump administration officials in criminal contempt unless they do XYZ thing. And my response was, okay, let's literally play this out. I mean, how is this going to work in practice? You're going to hold someone in criminal contempt. Well, the U.S. Marshal just might not enforce the order. Worst case scenario, you hold someone in contempt. Well, then Trump just pardons him. So one way or the other, the judiciary is not going to win this battle.
So just one more thing on this, and then we can move on, which would be, so if we were really trying to steelman the other argument here, the other argument, you think it basically just boils down to this sort of discrepancy between the lower court and the higher court, right? Is that like the simplest way of saying it?
So that's part of it. The other part here, as pertains to this thing that Mark Levin and Hugh were talking about, this Judge Boasberg, Trendy Aragua thing, the planes were literally not even here in the U.S. So, I mean, even just conceding for the sake of argument that so-called nationwide injunctions are a thing, which they're not.
Right.
But even conceding that for the sake of argument, as lawyers do, you can't bind someone who's over international waters. So even on the basic facts of this case, it just doesn't pass any kind of muster here. At some point, Donald Trump really had an imperative to stand up to one of these lawless punks, and that really is what they are. Is they are lawless punks. I mean, this Judge Boasberg seems like he's got a daughter working for some kind of left-wing NGO. I mean, it's a similar story for all of them, honestly. So at some point, you had to stand up there.
I said one more, but let me give you one more bonus on this, which is, would you be worried at some point, and I'm with you on this, and I understand the legal rationalization, would you be worried at some point that if Trump goes after enough judges, that it does disintegrate the judicial branch at some level, that judges will be afraid to ever go against the president and something like that? I mean, I guess you could argue the complete reverse right now, that that's what they're assaulting him for.
Right. So it goes both ways, right? So the judiciary is kind of the ones who are putting their own credibility at risk. There's actually a wonderful line on this. So Antonin Scalia had a dissent back in 2015. and he had this blistering dissent. And the final paragraph of this dissenting opinion is he says, with every instance that we go, with overstepping our legitimate boundaries, I'm paraphrasing David, it's a close paraphrase. With every decision that we go with overstepping our legitimate boundaries and exposing our own hubris, we get ever closer to being reminded of our own impotence. And that's the key word, impotence. That's kind of what I was saying a few minutes ago, is that they're not going to win this. Now, here is where I will throw you a bone. The instance that I personally actually start to get worried is if there is a Supreme Court judgment that binds, let's say, Donald Trump, because he could be a named party. Trump versus Hawaii was a case from the first term. If there's an actual party named Trump, and then Trump basically sticks two middle fingers, that's a problem.
There's a problem. All right. If you're trying to lose fat and get leaner, listen up, because this one's a game changer. I've been weightlifting, doing my cardio, tracking my macros, doing everything right. Whey protein, creatine, meal prepping, all of it. And yet there were times when the results weren't just showing up the way I expected. And I know I'm not alone. The truth is, it's not just about how much you eat or how hard you train. It's about how your body is using energy. And that's where Lumen comes in. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. With just one breath in the morning, Lumen tells you if you're burning fat or carbs for fuel, and based on that, gives you custom guidance to optimize your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress levels. No more cookie-cutter diet plans that work for someone else, but not for you. Lumen tailors everything to your metabolism in real time. And the best part, over time, these small daily adjustments compound, helping you burn more fat, build muscle efficiently, and boost your overall metabolic health. So if you're serious about taking your fitness to the next level, go to lumen.me/Rubin or click the link below and you'll get 15% off your Lumen device. Go to lumen.me/Rubin and start optimizing your health today. All right, I think we should probably put a pin in it there, and we'll see how some of it shakes out. It's a damn shame that this episode is not sponsored by Blue Chew, because you just said impotence, and really would have been perfect. Okay, let's move on. I started by saying that it's kind of better. I think it's better for America and Jews and Israel and free people in general when people are not talking about Jews, because when things are basically okay for the Jews, it's pretty much okay for everybody. When things go sideways for the Jews, it's usually bad pretty much for everybody. I think that's largely what this book is about. I know you've been working on this for years, and this is something that you care about very deeply. What was the original idea of why you even wanted to write about this book? Because did you start writing this before October 7th?
After.
It was after October 7th. So was that really like the thing that was like, I have to write something about this, because you were seeing the sort of hysterical reaction?
Yeah. You know, Dave, I've been a writer for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I think first met when I was working for the Daily Wire. I was a writer for them. So I've been a writer for a long time. I write a weekly syndicated column. I mean, you and I just did the whole law thing. I've written legal scholarship, right? So I've done everything in writing that you can do other than write a book. So I wanted to write a book. So I started initially outlining a totally different book back in the summer of 2023. Kind of like a more standard kind of like, I'm a young conservative guy. Here's my ideas to like where we are and where we should go. I'm not dismissing that. I mean, for all I know, that could be my next book.
Yeah.
So I don't want to kind of bite off the hand that might feed me. But October 7th did happen. And I chose to write this not just because of October 7th, but because of the reaction to October 7th. I mean, Dave, you and I are good friends, as this audience probably knows. And I remember your show here on the Rubin Report on October 9th, so the Monday afterwards. I remember watching it vividly. I mean, I felt you like in that moment there. Like, we were in such pain, not just because of the 7th, but because within hours, people are trying to blame the victim. They're trying to blame it on the Jews. I mean, the world had this moment here where you had this opportunity where the Holy Land, the Jewish people, a strong American ally, has just suffered its worst slaughter since literally Hitler and the Nazis, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, you have this medieval Islamist death cult trying to take us back to the 7th century. And the world could have said, you know what? I'm going to side with the former, not the latter. But literally within hours, the 33 Harvard groups or whatever it was there, yeah. the cacophony was real, and it was deafening, and it was beyond disturbing. I mean, like jaw-dropping to the floor. So it was really the reaction to the 7th that I said, okay, someone here has to defend not just the state of Israel, but someone frankly just has to defend the Jewish people. Someone has to defend just really just the West, because the Jewish people helped build the West, as I argue in this book.
Yeah, so make that argument a little bit. And while you do that, I'm going to put up a map of the Middle East, because I always think it's, people focus on Israel so much, and it's the size of Jersey, barely 8 miles wide. It's unfathomably small, and there's this endless focus on it. And yet it is influential, and Jewish people obviously are influential. So what is that connection there, or what is that thing?
So we talk a lot about how Western civilization is at a crossroads, right? We can go one way, we can go the other. We're at an inflection point. All these kind of... Totally agree with that. I totally agree. But again, because I'm a lawyer, I like to define terms. So what is the West? I mean, what is Western civilization here? We're defending the West against the barbarians, but what are we defending? Who are we defending there? So in the book, I argue that Western civilization effectively begins with the Bible, really with God's revelation in the book of Exodus to Moses and the Israelites, the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai there. I think a lot of people would start the modern West a little later with the Greeks and the Romans and Aristotle and all that. But I think it's a total misreading of history. I mean, when you look at the American founding, when you look at Europe and the English common law, I mean, they cared about the Greeks and Romans. They cared a lot about the Bible.
The Bible, yeah.
I mean, the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia has a quote from the book of Leviticus. And I mean, you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin famously wanted the national seal of the United States to be Moses parting the Red Sea. I mean, heck, even a century and a half before that, when William Bradford was on the Mayflower sailing across the Atlantic, William Bradford actually spoke about 1,000 words of Hebrew because he was tutored by a scholar back in England on the Hebrew Bible and all that. And when he got to Plymouth Colony, they actually briefly discussed even just ditching the English language and speaking Hebrew because they were so enamored by the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew Scripture. So this is really deeply ingrained in the American conscience there. And just part of bringing that back to the surface really is what I'm trying to do here as well. The Jewish state of Israel is kind of just the geopolitical outpost of this same dynamic there. Just as he who wishes to destroy the West first goes after the Jewish people, he who seeks to destroy, let's call it the nation state order, will first go after Israel for multiple reasons. It happens to be the Jew of the nations. But even more than that, I argue in the book, Israel's actually the world's first nation state. I mean, when King David unites the tribes in Jerusalem there, that's a nation state. They had no extraterritorial ambitions there. Frankly, actually, biblical Israel was a nation state in contrast to the Roman Empire, which was more of an imperial model. So if you want to defend the modern nation state system, and I'm a national, if you like the nation state, if you oppose the Soros, globalist, Klaus Schwab agenda, it makes a lot of sense to defend the state of Israel on nation-state, nationalist grounds there. By the way, that's one of the reasons why Israel is so targeted at the United Nations. Another reason is, of course, just good old-fashioned Jew hatred. But there's a lot here. But the point, Dave, for your question is here, there, and everywhere. If you have civilizational ambitions to crush a big swath of the West, then you always start with the Jews, always.
So, okay, so what, if you give me the 3-sentence, so what is the West specifically? Individual rights, liberty, give me let's posit both those ideas. So one is the West.
All right, so it is to an extent kind of the classic Straussian formulation of Athens and Jerusalem, reason and revelation. Yeah. But I make a hard case in the book that of those two, revelation is actually a little more important. I think a lot of people kind of overdo it with the reason thing there. The problem is that unaided reason, I mean, if you just sit there and close your eyes and you're trying to kind of think about, what is reasonable? I mean, this can go off the rails very, very quickly.
As Elon tweeted at Sam Harris before he left Twitter, you can mindfully meditate your mind into mush or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah. Look, I mean, Dave, I keep at my desk at all times a rock that a rabbi gave me from the crematorium of Auschwitz, which is a little intense, but it kind of it grounds me every day. The Nazis thought they were acting reasonable. Germany was a very advanced society. Mm-hmm. It was one of the most philosophically, culturally, musically advanced societies in the world. I mean, they thought they were acting with reason there. So you have to tether it to something there. And that tethering, I think, really does go all the way back to the 10 Commandments. So yes, the West is this balancing of individualism with the common good, with nationalism for sure there. But, even something as basic as nation state versus empire, that's all there as well. I mean, frankly, going back literally to the book of Genesis. The collapse of the Tower of Babel is actually the first rejection of empire in favor of the nation state. So there's so much rich political philosophy, morality, ethics. So, Dave, something as simple and prosaic as the golden rule, treat others as you'd like to be treated. Well, where's that coming from? It's actually coming from Leviticus chapter 19. I mean, treat the stranger as your fellow. So it's just so much that we take for granted is all right in there, honestly.
Right. So you don't think it just magically appeared out of the Enlightenment, which seemingly a lot of more liberal thinkers seem to think, okay, all right, so that's broadly what the West is. Now this is a civilizational battle. So what's over here? It's ogres. It's whatever they had in who are they fighting in Game of Thrones? It's somebody coming at the wall or something.
I'm actually not a Game of Thrones guy, believe it or not. I probably should be.
There's always somebody, and they got bad teeth, and they're attacking the wall. It's those guys. So what's going on over here?
All right. So I pick out three forces in particular. You have wokeism, Islamism, and global neoliberalism. Now, that's probably not an exhaustive list. I mean, we could probably kind of have a more complicated taxonomy and devise new categories, but to dumb it down, those are the three broad buckets.
Instead of just said Democrats, we get it. But okay.
It's true, honestly, these days.
Yeah.
Tragically, it really is true.
Yeah.
So wokeism and Islamism are pretty self-explanatory. I have a whole chapter in the book about the threat from the woke DEI anti-Semitism, as well as some of this kind of more neo-Nietzschean nihilist anti-Semitism. That's in that chapter as well. Islamism, self-explanatory, okay?
Why don't you explain what the second one is? I think most people get, like, Jews are thought of as successful, so you're thrown out of the DEI calculator. Yeah. That's the first one. What's the nihilist version of that?
So I'm thinking here of some of these online pseudonymous people like Bronze Age Pervert a few years ago. He kind of fell off the map a little bit, but he was big. I mean, even the Tate brothers, that's a very kind of current example, right? The Tates, to me, are kind of trying to do a lot of old pagan ideas that are very anti-biblical. This notion that the top thing to value is brute strength and manliness, and you can spread your seed for as far as it goes there. I mean, this is very anti-Judeo-Christian, very anti-Jewish, anti-Christian, anti-biblical. This is old pagan stuff there. And we see this new paganism creep up over and over again, by the way. I mean, frankly, kind of the whole gender ideology thing. I mean, the notion of gender-affirming care for children there. It's kind of a resuscitation of this old paganism as well. So the lines do blur a little bit there.
Right. Do you blame the rise in that, the sort of Tate version of this smacking a 15-year-old and then being a hero to the conservatives? Do you blame that on wokeism? Like it was going to sort of be a natural reaction of, oh, no, you can't be a man is a woman. Well, eventually they're just going to be like this rubber band reaction, and men are going to be like sort of the worst version of men, or the pagan version of men.
That's probably part of it. I mean, part of it is also like the war on men, and that people like Matt Walsh talk a lot about. He's totally right. I mean, when you tell men that they are terrible and evil and toxic, then eventually you're going to want to just burst out and show, I can lift a lot of weights here. I'm strong. I mean, so part of it is definitely that. Part of it, I mean, not to sound like a crotchety old crank, but I guess I will for a sec. I mean, part of it, I think, genuinely is the decline of the influence of the Bible and religion here. Because if you have that strong foundation here in the schools, in private sector there, you wouldn't necessarily end up at a place like Andrew Tate there. So that's the wokeism and kind of like the woke. I don't like the term woke right, but for purposes today, I guess we'll call it the woke right. Okay, so then there's Islamism, which is self-explanatory. I mean, that's Hamas, October 7th. That's the Bourbon Street massacre that happened just 2.5 months ago, as if Americans needed another reminder that this
14 people killed basically on New Year's Day. Nobody talks about it. It's incredible.
No one talks about it.
In the United States.
No one. I mean, that was just 2.5 months ago. It's insane, honestly. And then you have global neoliberalism, which is kind of what I'm talking about here. It's basically John Lennon's song "Imagine" playing out on a global chessboard. In the book, I call it the homogenizing imperative, seeking to make everyone the same, to eradicate all the various distinctions that make us normal. Who we worship, how we worship, just generally kind of familial congregation or the tribal things that really kind of make humans in the first place, including, by the way, the nation state itself. That's really the ultimate goal there. So those are our enemies. And the point, Dave, is that Jews and Christians who share a biblical inheritance, we have the exact same enemies. As you and I were saying, they always start with the Saturday people. Yeah. But their goal is always the Sunday people. So Karl Marx is actually a good example. So Karl Marx, in the 1840s, he has this infamously anti-Semitic essay called On the Jewish Question. He wrote it a few years before the Communist Manifesto. His thoughts on the Jews are very clear. He himself was Jewish. He was kind of one of the world's foremost self-hating Jews of the 19th century. But his final goal was not the Jews. He's quite explicit that his final goal is to overthrow all of Western capitalism, all of Western Christendom, that which the Christian civilization has admirably built there. But he understands that you start with the original people of the book, the people that are called by Isaiah to be a light unto the nations. You start with them, and then you can launch from there to a much bigger target.
Are you stuck in the yo-yo dieting cycle? You lose weight, gain it all back, plus a few extra pounds, then do it all over again? It's not just frustrating, it's dangerous. Studies show that repeated weight fluctuations can increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and other serious health problems. That's why doctors created Lean, a supplement designed to help you lose weight and keep it off. Unlike injections, Lean is a natural science-backed formula that requires no prescription. It works by supporting healthy blood sugar levels, controlling appetite, and burning fat by converting it into energy. If you're tired of losing weight just to gain it right back and you're ready to lose weight at a healthy, sustainable pace, Lean was made for you. Get 20% off your first order with code Rubin20 at takelean.com. That's Rubin20 at takelean.com. Start your journey today. So is that really what the focus on Israel is, which is that this is, I keep saying to people post October 7th, I'm Jewish, I happen to care about Israel. I think you've laid out plenty of reasons why people who aren't Jewish should care about Israel. But to me, it's like the number one, if you were a Christian, you should care about Israel, putting aside all of the religious stuff, is if they take out Israel, they kill every last Jew, guess who's next?
Right.
And that really, I don't want to make that argument. It's not a fun argument to make, but like, it's fairly obvious. They're not going to be like, okay, we're wrapping it up.
Right. Well, Hamas is pretty clear about this, too. I mean, Dave, anti-Semites in history, one thing I give them credit for, they're actually shockingly clear about what they believe. I mean, Karl Marx laid it all out there on the Jewish question. Yeah. Hitler, I mean, he had a whole book on this, Mein Kampf, but people had just done the reading, so to speak, there, right? So similarly, Hamas, in their 1987 charter, which you can find publicly available, they're not hiding the ball there. They're very clear. They want to kill all the Jews. They want to kill people like you and me. They also want to kill all...
They even want to kill Glenn Greenwald. I mean, he's out there simping for them all day long. They want to kill him.
Honestly, in my heart of hearts, I suspect they would probably spare Glenn Greenwald. if I had to guess.
Well, till he's not useful.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But they also want to kill all so-called infidels. Yeah. So all Christians, frankly, most Muslims who don't subscribe to their own fanatical version of Islam as well. So they're not hiding the ball there at all whatsoever. So yes, Israel as a state, just like the children of Israel, the Jewish people, the state of Israel is always the canary in the coal mine. Always, always, always. But the state of Israel, Dave, I have a whole chapter in this book making basically let's call it the MAGA America First realist case for U.S.-Israel relations. This is, I think, a very crucial point because there are a lot of people these days, you and I both see them out there, trying to say, oh, Israel, that's an old Bush administration issue. It's an old neocon issue. And, I've been criticizing neoconservatism longer than these punks have known what the word neoconservatism even means there.
Before the frog meme ever came out. Yeah.
I have always been a hard-headed realist. I mean, to me, I look around the world at every geopolitical issue and I say, what is in the U.S. national interest? And then based on my answer to that, what, if anything, should we do about it? So as a realist, I look at the geopolitical map and I say, well, America's number one threat this century is clearly China, the Chinese Communist Party. No doubt about that whatsoever. And I agree that America can and should strategically redeploy a lot of resources and assets into the Indo-Pacific, especially as the Taiwan threat heats up. The relevant question then, from a kind of grand strategy, geopolitical chessboard perspective, is how can America best safeguard its very real interests in this very volatile part of the world, the Middle East, this uniquely jihad-ridden part of the world? How can we do that while moving resources to the Far East? Mm-hmm. The obvious answer is you embolden your allies on the ground to take care of the region, to secure it and patrol it in a way that redounds to both of your interests. As the case may be, Israel has consistently demonstrated that we Americans and they Israelis have effectively the exact same interests in the region. I'll give you just one very brief example there. So last summer, Dave, you're a film guy, so my favorite film of all time is The Godfather. So I love the Michael Corleone baptism scene at the end there.
Pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, Godfather 2 technically, but Godfather 1 is my second favorite. Anyway, So there's this amazing Michael Corleone Godfather Baptist scene there. Yeah. So Israel went on kind of a Michael Corleone Baptist scene, revenge on our enemies, killing spree last summer. And it culminates with the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. Mm. Well, I guess Sinwar was after that, but It partially culminates with Nasrallah cowardly hiding his bunker in Beirut.
Yep.
Before they got Nasrallah, they took out two high-ranking Hezbollah jihadis by the name of Fuad Shakur and Ibrahim Akil. Fuad Shakur and Ibrahim Akil are the men responsible for, respectively, the 1983 Beirut barracks bombings that slaughtered 240-plus Americans and the 1983 U.S. Embassy bombing in Beirut. Those two men had a $5 and $7 million U.S. State Department bounty on their head, respectively. Nothing happened for 4 decades. Israel finishes the job. So people are like, oh, what does the U.S. get out of U.S.-Israel relations? Well, you get a dead Ibrahim Akil, you get a dead Fuad Shakur, and as if that's not good enough, you get a dead Hassan Nasrallah on top of that.
Right. But dead bad people aside, there's a lot of other things that they get that I think maybe aren't explained properly. What do you think about that?
Of course. Look, I mean, Israel's often referred to as the second Silicon Valley there. I mean, there's so much technologically speaking when it comes to military sharing there. I mean, Iron Dome, of course, which is a brilliant and an incredible piece of military technology. That is an Israeli innovation there. Intelligence, I mean, we rely more on Mossad than probably any other country other than the so-called Five Eyes countries, UK, New Zealand, Australia, and so forth there. So we rely very heavily on them for that there. And more generally speaking, especially as things are now heating up with the Houthis in the Red Sea there, Trump has said that he's going to step up on the Houthis, and that's all well and good, I think. I mean, they've come after American ships, so America clearly has a demonstrated interest there. But even if we were to pull out of the region, if we were to basically just say to the IDF, you guys take care of the business here, again, we can trust them to do what is best, not just for themselves, but in a way that redounds to both of our interests as well.
Do you think it's possible that in this civilizational war that some of the countries in the West will survive and some will not? Like, to me, it's obvious America is riding the ship right now. And I think partially because of the First Amendment, definitely because of the Second Amendment, also because of the way we've done the melting pot for so long and put such a premium on freedom and we're born in revolution. I think we have much better machinery and granular stuff to get through this civilizational battle. I think Israel has it for cultural reasons, and maybe being small in this case actually does help them, and military. Where then I look, I was just in Britain, and it's like, it's a freaking disaster, and everyone's whispering about it. France has it, Germany has it, Belgium has it, Holland has it, et cetera, et cetera. Do you sense that this civilization, that we're going to just lose some countries and some will survive? Like, what do you think the map actually looks like as it relates to that?
I mean, I am utterly terrified about the future of Europe. Completely terrified. Dave, I lived in Europe. I did a semester living in London in the UK. I traveled all throughout there. I mean, London has a very special place in my heart, but I've not been in 15 years now.
It ain't the same.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I'm terrified to go back because I feel like all my memories will frankly just be ruined by what I see today. They've done it to themselves. I mean, they've totally 1,000% done it to themselves because partially of this homogenizing, all human beings are as interchangeable as widgets or pencils or whatnot. There's logic that you can just import foreign cultures and just substitute them for your own. So I'm terrified about Europe. I mean, the entire kind of European Union Eurozone experiment is basically one continental-wide experiment in globalism. It's not exactly going particularly well by any metric, including just European Central Bank monetary policy. I mean, whoever thought it was a good idea for Germany and Italy to be on the exact same currency clearly knows nothing about economics. I mean, none of it makes sense whatsoever. So I'm totally terrified about the future of Europe. I could totally see a world in which some nation states survive through this inflection point that we've identified and some kind of get subsumed into various types of blobs. I mean, is there a day where France and Germany could cease to be France and Germany and just become Europe? Like literally without any kind of finer distinction? I think it's totally plausible. I mean,
I think it'd be closer that they'd become closer to Saudi Arabia or something than just broad Europe. That's the real problem.
Yeah, no, totally. And I've seen it for myself. I mean, my wife and I went to a wedding. It was actually a wedding between two Israelis. So it was an Israeli couple that got married less than a week after October 7th in Lake Como in Italy, of all places there. And very emotional wedding, as you can imagine. But we spent time in Lake Como, went down to Milan there. And my God, I mean, that's my first time back in Italy in, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever there. Holy moly. I mean, you barely recognize the place. I mean, it's absolutely nuts there. So that could easily happen in our lifetime. That could easily happen in our lifetime where you start seeing, for instance, and I'm going to get called a fear monger here, but I think it happens to be true. I mean, you could literally start seeing some legislators in some of these European parliaments start introducing Sharia legislation sooner rather than later. I think it's totally
Scotland
possible.
was getting close to that. I think Ireland could be heading that way, which is the craziest of all of them. Like there's so how much of this is just a numbers game? That there's just an awful lot of these people. They're reproducing like crazy. Like it just is, and sort of more successful liberal, I mean, in the good sense of liberal-minded people, don't reproduce as much. You have maybe 1.7 babies. They have 8 babies. We got a problem there. The number one name in the UK right now is Mohammed. By the way, the number one name in Israel is Mohammed because they name most of their kids, the 20% population, name most of their kids Mohammed, and obviously there's a lot of Israeli names. But even that says something. Like, there's a numbers portion here that's tough.
So Israeli Jews, though, have a birth rate of around 3.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see it even higher than 3. And, contrary to what a lot of people say, it's actually not just due to the very religious people. Even secular Israelis have well over 2 children per household based on most studies I've seen there. So something is actually different in the state of Israel when it comes to this as well. There's no magic formula for trying to convince people to have children there. But I think general rule, above all, when people are happy and they are confident about the future, that's when you want to start dating, getting married, having children there. Unfortunately, the West, more broadly speaking, certainly the United States, we're not a very happy people anymore. We've kind of forgotten what it's like to be happy in many respects. I mean, all the polling on this, are you optimistic about the future? Are you happy? Are you depressed there? Does your life have meaning? I mean, it's all terrible. And like, I don't want to give out black pills there, but the point is, like, it can be better.
Yeah. Well, you know my take on all of this because we're texting a lot with a couple of friends, and I'm always trying to give the white pill version of everything, like things will get better. That's the story of humanity. And I know you're a little more on the skeptical side of that, let's say. But it seems to me that one thing that I find interesting right now is that there's obviously so many good things happening with this Trump presidency. It's crazy. It's happening really fast, and that's why people are freaking out. But to see a portion of people on the right that are like hysterical about a million things, I'm like, guys, you got the president you want. There's so many good things happening. We're closing the border. We're deporting. Like, but I think some people are just afraid of actual success in some sense. And maybe that's what the West is largely afraid of.
For sure. Look, I mean, the Trump administration has been a smashing success as far as I'm concerned. I mean, look, a couple of like things that I could like maybe criticize if I'm feeling very personal.
What would even be if you were really trying?
Okay, if I were really trying,
come on.
I don't like the TikTok stuff. I'm like a ban TikTok because to me it's not just about China. It's also about it's like really bad for kids. Mm-hmm. Like there's like a mental health portion here too. It's not just a national security China concern, but that's all
right. I was just trying to get something out. No, but all right, you don't like TikTok,
but that's really nitpicky. Okay,
you strike me as a big TikToker.
I believe it or not, I've actually never done it. Now, my mother-in-law, by the way, is a huge TikToker, so she will be devastated.
Oh, so that's why you don't like
TikTok. She will
be
devastated if TikTok actually actually goes away there. But the point, Dave, is that there are ways that Americans can increase their happiness. And look, I'm not going to pretend like I'm a happiness expert or a welfare expert there. But one of the implicit arguments throughout this book is that for Jews and Christians alike, one way to find meaning and happiness is to engage with and rediscover your tradition. I mean, I can personally speak to this, right? I grew up very secular. Very secular. I've only become religious over the past few years there. I'm not saying everyone has to do what I've done, obviously, but like just a personal example. I mean, I genuinely do find more value and meaning when I feel that I'm living a lifestyle in accord with a certain direction and ultimately serving a certain being here. And that's coincided with getting married and having kids. And
you got married. You're punching way above your pay grade over there. Everybody loves cheer, and you have a new baby girl. So yeah, you're living it. So what do you think? Moving away from sort of like the broad strokes of the West in this fight, Israel at the moment, they are in an existential war. It seems like some of it's gotten a bit better as basically Hezbollah has been taken out, so the North will kind of calm down, but there's still hostages. there's going to be a problem in Judea and Samaria at some point. It's bubbling a little bit. Like, what does the end of this, if there's day after, what does it actually look like? Like, how do you get to the other side of the civilizational?
Sure. So let's be honest here. The Middle East is not going to be stable, maybe ever, as long as Islam is Islam. But at a bare minimum, until the Iranian regime goes. And to be clear, Josh Hammer is not calling to send in the 101st Airborne and start bombing Tehran.
Here you go. That's not my. This is the clip they're going to go for.
No, that's not my stance, though. It's never been my stance. In fact, I have a very similar stance, frankly, to what Trump did the first time around, which is you do this whole crippling sanctions, maximum pressure campaign, try to get the people to just uprise and throw off this horrific cancer, this horrific regime there. But unless and until that regime goes, I'm not sure there's ever going to be true stability in any of these hotspots you're talking about, whether it's Judea and Samaria, where there's all these Iran-funded militia groups, whether it's Lebanon, where you still have a trace of Hezbollah. Yes, they're not nearly as strong as they were recently. The Houthis in Yemen. It really does all come back to Iran. So that's part of the answer here. Now, when it comes to Gaza in particular there, Israel genuinely has to finish this job against Hamas for at least two reasons that I can identify. The simpler reason is that Donald Trump is basically telling them, finish the job. He's talking about unleashing the gates of hell there. The ceasefire is clearly off now. So Bibi has, and that's Prime Minister Netanyahu, he has full-blown permission to go in there. The problem is that if he doesn't finish the job from this perspective, Donald Trump's a leader, I think, who abhors weakness and respects strength. Mm-hmm. So if he's telling you to do something, you better do it, especially if he thinks that it's in America's interest, which, oh, by the way, obliterating Hamas totally is. Yeah. So he has no choice, Netanyahu, from that perspective. The other reason that he has no choice is because at the onset of this war, Israel announced two very clear war aims. They said, we're bringing the hostages home and we're going to destroy Hamas. Now, there are some hostages left, but they've made admirable progress on that front. But Hamas is still there. We saw that with these hostage exchanges there. And the lingua franca, the language of the Middle East, is strength. If you don't show that you are going to actually kick some butt and to actually fulfill your word and your vows, you lose all credibility. You lose all deterrent there. So they actually genuinely have to finish this job in Gaza. I don't know how long it's going to take.
Right. So is the inherent problem, though, if you're trying to save those remaining, it's about 22 people, I think, including an American who's still, at least one American who's still down there, that could basically be in direct conflict with what Trump laid out, which I agree with, which is open the gates of hell. And these people have to leave. The Gazans have to leave. Go to Somalia, go to Egypt, I don't even care where they go. But that's in conflict, perhaps, with saving those 22 people. Yeah. And I think that's really why this has dragged on so long.
All right, so I'm going to sound like a heartless and callous bastard, but I'll say it anyway. I actually think that Israel messed up at the beginning by announcing these two war aims as being on the same footing. Mm-hmm. Look, if I had a loved one down there, of course I would be at the parliament every day pleading to do whatever you can. But trying to think clear-eyed and sober for a second here, it does seem to me that one of these two aims, meaning the eradication of Hamas, is pretty clearly more important actually than the other. I hate to think of them as being in tension at loggerheads, but
no, it's a horrible
it's awful. It's been awful for a year and a half now. But to the extent that they are in tension there, you really do have to prioritize actually getting Hamas out. Now, Judea and Samaria is a more complicated question, right? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
I care a lot about Judea and Samaria. I care a lot about that. I mean, that's the actual heartland. I mean, frankly, going back to where the Bible was based. I mean, the Bible was not in Tel Aviv. The Bible was in towns like Jericho. I mean, really throughout the hills of Judea and Samaria, right?
Jesus of
Judea. I mean, Jesus was a Jew from Judea. Yeah. You know, he was not this keffiyeh-clad Hamasnik that these leftist propagandists portray him as, or anything like that. There. Yeah. I'm very eager to see what Donald Trump says about Judea and Samaria. That's kind of one of my big questions at this moment that we're talking is he going to take the same approach to Judea and Samaria that he took to Gaza? I don't know the answer. I think it's entirely possible. What I definitely know is that the old Oslo Accord style, quote unquote, two-state solution for Judea and Samaria has obviously been a demonstrable failure. And if there's anyone in America who was well equipped to change the paradigm on that issue, it certainly is Donald Trump.
Looking for more freedom in your streaming? Download the Rumble app today and experience content like never before. Available on Android and iOS, you can take Rumble with you wherever you go, whether you're on the move or just relaxing at home. Want to enjoy it on the big screen? No problem. Rumble is also available on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, LG Smart TVs, and Samsung TV apps, giving you the power of Rumble at your fingertips. Rumble is the platform that gives you the freedom to watch what you want when you want. Download the Rumble app today and make sure to search and follow my channels to receive live notifications. All right, so let's say, well, in some sense, the Israel portion is removed, meaning Israel does finish the job, or it's this protracted thing that kind of never ends, something like that. Where does that leave the rest of the West in terms of the signaling, I suppose? Like, if they can't finish Hamas or they can't get the hostages out, I think what actually it portends for the rest of us in America and across Europe is something unbelievably horrific, because we have these people in our borders now. We know it.
If Israel cannot finish a job against Hamas, then it's unclear to me whether a Western nation state will ever be able to win a defensive war against an enemy again. I mean, that basically is what this comes down to. I mean, Israel is basically trying to teach the West how to fight an actual war. The West has not fought. Certainly we in the United States have not fought a true war against a true existential enemy to its fruition until World War II, right? And that is what total war looks like. I mean, the carpet bombing of Dresden. I mean, the people talk about Israel committing genocide in Gaza there. I mean, guys, go back and look at Dresden. Go back and look at Hiroshima. Okay, I mean that's what total war looks like. That's not what's happening in Gaza for the past year and a half. But unless Israel can finish a job and basically teach the West all over again how to actually win a war, it's not obvious to me that. I mean, let's play this out. I mean, God forbid if South Texas or the Sonoran Desert in Arizona had an October 7th style event from the Sinaloa cartel or Jalisco or one of these horrific drug cartels operating there in northern Mexico there.
We'd bomb Canada.
Yeah, right, with the current guy.
Yeah.
No, you're probably right, honestly. At least as long as Trudeau's Liberal Party is still in charge there.
Yeah.
But would America actually have the fortitude to go back in Pancho Villa style and actually go take out the cartels? I don't know, honestly. I don't know. So part of Israel.
I think under Trump, the answer is yes. The question is, what would we do to protect our hostages and things of that nature? I think in terms of just blowing shit up in Mexico, yeah, we would do it without even thinking twice.
No, I think you're right about that, to be clear there. But, again, to kind of tie the strands of this conversation together, one might argue that part of the whole, like, Isaiah light into the nations thing there is teaching the world how to do certain things there. So if Israel can kind of, again, remind the world how to deal with a situation like this there, one might say it's morally incumbent upon them to do so from that perspective as well. That's a little bit of a stretch when it comes to the analogy there, but I genuinely do worry about it. Look, to your point as to the fact that we are now filled with subversive actors, I mean, that sadly, that's just demonstrably true. I mean, the Bourbon Street guy was radicalized in a mosque in Houston, Texas there. It's horrible stuff. I mean, I've been to Michigan multiple times in recent months. I mean, I've driven through Dearborn. I mean, it's pretty terrifying, honestly.
So, and how long do you think a society can hold like that? How long can a Western society that's trying to hold up to the ideals that you mentioned at the top can have, okay, I don't like Elon Musk because he's doing something with Doge, so I'm going to blow up a Tesla charger station, or I don't like Donald Trump because he seems to like Israel, so I'm going to occupy Colombia. Like, how long do you think that sort of thing can hold? I don't think it can hold much longer, actually.
So my argument in the book, and just kind of in general, is that you have to affirmatively stand for something. So values neutrality is here, there, everywhere, and non-option. I mean, this is the whole this is the whole national conservatism argument, right? Is that you actually have to put forward a concrete vision as to what you stand for. Because when you do the whole liberalism, marketplace of ideas thing, and you say, oh, all ideas are created equal, whether it's Sharia law or whether it's Thomas Jefferson's Declaration. I mean, when you really do the whole marketplace of ideas, let the chips fall where they may thing, I mean, people are going to go to the vision that has some sort of moral argumentation, even if it's an immoral vision.
Right.
I mean, we see that actually.
The liberals usually get beheaded, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we see that actually in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, frankly. For years and years, the so-called pro-Israel side would just say, two states, we just want peace. I mean, that's not a substantive argument there. That's a purely kind of relativistic procedural argument. On the other side, the bad people, the Students for Justice in Palestine, their side, they're putting forward a moral vision. Now, it happens to be grossly immoral, right? But it's a moral vision rooted in kind of colonialism and oppression, all this DEI neo-Marxist garbage there. So values-neutral proceduralism is never, ever, ever going to get the better, I think, of a substantive vision there. So here on the home front, when you're dealing with folks like the Hezbollah apologists in Dearborn, I mean, one of my solutions to that is that all hands on deck, including but not limited to the actual government itself, has to put forward a vision here. This is kind of the whole notion of kind of re-imbuing the public square with Judeo-Christian morality and Bible and scripture and all that. I mean, I'm not sure what the alternative is. I mean, we've basically been trying this whole values neutrality thing since World War II. I mean, America has been one way or the other kind of a left liberal or a right liberal experiment for going on, 6, 7, 8 decades now. It's not working. It's literally not working. Immigration is obviously a core piece of this puzzle too. But the point is, a lot of these folks are citizens. A lot of these folks are actually already here. You can't deport them. Denaturalizing citizenship is an extraordinarily difficult and in some ways problematic process. So we're probably not going to start doing that en masse for better or for worse. So you have to do something. And I think that trying to take a stand from the government on down and saying that we are this, while respecting First Amendment and everything there, but we stand for this. This is what it means to be an American today. That would be a strong start, I think.
And it seems like that's starting to happen. I mean, Rubio, I think, has been particularly good at this, right? So if this civilizational battle does not go completely sideways, what do you think America and the Western world look like in 5 years? Maybe this is what the last few pages of the book are about, but I just got my copy right when you walked in.
So I am an optimist. I mean, Dave, you mentioned some of these group chats that you and I are in together, and you're kind of the big white pill guy. I'm like I'm
just always trying to make sure not everybody's killing themselves.
Yeah. I'm like a white gray pill guy. I mean, I'm somewhere in the murky middle. I'm definitely not a black pill guy.
Yeah.
I do remain optimistic. I really do remain optimistic because most Americans fundamentally in their core are very, very, very good people. I mean, we chat offline about this. I mean, the number of examples of just salt of the earth people that are standing for truth and righteousness. I mean, in the Israel issue, have come out in favor of a people that they don't know, of a tiny country they don't know, because they just recognize that it is the right thing to do. That's absolutely inspiring. And, even the younger generation, there's a lot of people who get very upset about how out of touch the younger generation is. I mean, even when it comes to the 2024 election, though, I mean, the 18 to 29 demographic was basically a statistical margin of error between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris there. I mean, to be clear, there's some work to be done there on like the Middle East stuff, but they're not as crazy as people make it out to be. The future is actually overall in largely decent hands from what I can tell there. I mean, as long as TikTok doesn't get off the prowl, right? But I do remain pretty optimistic overall about the future there. And the United States still remains the bastion of Western civilization. We are the indispensable cog there. We have very strong leadership. I happen to love what Donald Trump is doing there. We'll see what happens in 2028 there. It's going to be an interesting primary at that time there. But as long as this general trajectory continues there, and you have to issue strong executive orders and pass strong laws. Donald Trump obviously does not shy away from the bold stuff. So for example, his anti-DEI executive order, literally one of the most transformative executive orders I've seen in my entire life. I mean, essentially largely winning the culture war overnight without firing a shot. I mean, between that and some of the transgender stuff there. I mean, that's how you got to play ball. That's how you play ball on all of these issues.
Until a judge jumps in and tries to stop you, and then
then we're back to where we started this conversation, obviously.
Yeah. Josh, I am told that the book, which just came out like a couple days ago, we're posting this on a Friday, so it came out like 3 days ago, has already sold out the first run. But the people can buy the book and it will appear sometime. Do we know when, if they buy it right now? Do we know how long it's going to take to get the book?
Yeah, so we actually sold out on Amazon literally the morning of publication day, which is
not bad.
Which is both a great thing and a frustrating thing. But no, I mean, seriously, thank you to everyone who's bought it. Sure. So it is being replenished on Amazon right now. So if you buy it on Amazon, it should get here, God willing, this coming week. So not a particularly long delay. It's also available on Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, other vendors as well.
And what are the chances that the New York Times, which is a far left rag on the wrong side of all of these issues, will put you on the bestseller list? I did note that Don't Burn This Country should have been #1 by sales. They did not put me on there at all. What do you think? I mean, you've got a lot of scary words in here. Israel, they don't like that word.
Civilization.
Jewish, they don't like that word. Nation, yeah, civilization, right. Hammer. It's a lot.
Dave, based on the fact
Let's
that...
take a gentleman's bet. I'll take what side of the bet do you want? Are you going to get on the list or not?
I'm going to go on a limb and say that I'm going to make it, Dave, but only because they're not going to watch this episode. If they watched this episode and they saw that I was with major thought criminal Dave Rubin, I honestly might be screwed.
Good luck. We're all counting on you.
Appreciate it.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.